Spider-Man No Way Home was really important for Phase 4 of the MCU. This movie was the most hyped up since Endgame, and I was pretty excited for it at the time. This was before we started getting consistently bad stories from the MCU, so I had no reason to expect anything other than greatness. I enjoyed it when it came out, but that was about a year and a half ago, so I wanted to take a look back at it and see if it was really that good, or if I just gave in to nostalgia bait. We pick up right where we left off Far From Home, with Peter's identity being revealed by Mysterio. J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons, shows up, and is apparently meant to be an Alex Jones parody. I didn't quite get that the first time I watched, but I can kind of see it now, mainly through the studio he has. Outside of the studio, he does not give off the same feeling as an Alex Jones type. Maybe that was to make it fly under the radar of executives, but they could have added a little bit more of a wink to the audience to make the parody stand out more.
I killed him. I already admit it. I did it. I killed him. I'm the bad guy. I'm the devil. Get rid of the First Amendment. Can we move on to other topics? I killed him.
Back to the actual story. I like the panic of Peter trying to get away from the crowds and the people surrounding him as he tries to get to MJ. This type of thing hammers home the friendly neighborhood aspect of Spider-Man, but it also shows that Peter's problems are only going to get bigger from here. His identity being revealed sealed that fact. Once Peter and MJ get back to Peter's apartment, the Department of Damage Control comes and arrests them. Why doesn't Happy use his connections as S.H.I.E.L.D. to get them out of there? Why is a damage control department arresting people? I remember them locking down a site in Homecoming, and I figured that was where their jurisdiction stopped. Why wouldn't they send in some form of strike team to take in a superhero who they view as a suspect in a murder? They just knocked on the door and stood there, and they're really lucky Peter has a good heart, or this would have never worked.
Federal agents, open up!
Federal agents, you stay here.
Department of Damage Control. We have a warrant for the arrest of Peter Parker.
Once Peter is in the interrogation room, he says that Nick Fury can explain everything. The interrogator replies with, Nick Fury has been off planet for a year. Like I said before, this movie starts right when the last one ended, so I went back to see if this could make any type of sense. Nick Fury shows up after Mysterio dies, and Karen confirms all the illusions are down. We then find out that the Nick Fury here is actually a Skrull, which doesn't make things any better in any way. Why does this random know that Nick Fury is gone, but one of the most important heroes on the planet is just left completely in the dark? What happened to the Skrull Fury, and why does Peter just sort of take the claim that Nick Fury has been gone in stride and never address it again? If the department knows that this Nick Fury is a Skrull, why not call him? If he doesn't know, has he only heard from S.H.I.E.L.D. that Nick Fury is leaving and nothing else for an entire year? This seemingly small line causes a lot of problems. We then cut to Matt Murdock telling Peter that his charges will be dropped, and it feels like we rushed through the legal aspect of Peter's identity being revealed. They do a good job of having the people of New York yell at Peter and view him differently, but it would have been nice to show someone from the department watching Peter and him having to shake a tail every now and then. We do get a pretty fun scene of Ned being interrogated and talking himself into a corner, and as a big fan of Jim Can't Swim, this is the type of thing I love. While Matt is talking to Peter, a brick flies in, and whoever got the brick this far into the room should look into the NFL as a career path. I like the writers introducing Matt's powers in this way. I would prefer leaving him out of She-Hulk and waiting for his own show to show him in the suit. If you have to show him at all before then, have him do subtle things that indicate he has powers like they do here. Peter's friends get rejected from MIT, and Peter thinks that being his friend caused it, yet Flash writes an entire book claiming that he is best friends with Spider-Man, yet still gets in. I thought this was meant to be an indication to the audience that they just weren't good enough to get in, but it turns out that they really did get rejected for being friends with Peter. I do like how they incorporate the struggle of trying to get into your dream college in such a natural way. Spider-Man is at his best when he's relatable, and who doesn't relate to the stress of getting into college?
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Peter then goes to Doctor Strange and convinces him to make the world forget about his secret identity. I appreciate the fact that going for a magic spell to wipe the minds of people throughout the world was Peter's first thought instead of reaching out to the admissions office. Ever since he linked up with the Avengers, every big problem he had required some grandiose plan, so expecting that kind of thing here makes sense. Peter messes up the spell and gets sent to find the person in charge of admissions. He starts a conversation with her, only to get stopped by Doc Ock. Doc Ock is the first nostalgia villain to show up, and his reveal is handled pretty well. His arrival was spoiled by the trailers, so we don't have to waste any time pausing for dramatic effect like we do later. Things kick right off and Peter does his best to limit casualties while taking down Doc Ock. I know that Twitter is starting to hate nanotech suits in comic book movies, but Peter's nanotech taking over Doc Ock's arms was pretty cool. I don't like helmets randomly disappearing either, but this is a pretty creative application of the concept. I remember liking Big Hero 6 as a kid, so if you do cool stuff involving nanotech, it tickles the nostalgia part of my brain. The fight itself is pretty par for the course, and once Peter stops Doc Ock, he convinces the admissions lady to give him and his friends a fair shot at MIT. Peter takes Doc Ock back to the Sanctum Sanctorium and tells Doctor Strange that he needs the help of his friends. Why?
Why?
They pretty much are there just to be Peter's friends, and I know that they help out later, but that's only after Doctor Strange is stuck in the mirror dimension. At the point that Peter asks for them, he only needs Doctor Strange. The only help that Ned and MJ give is scrolling through TikTok looking for leads. Doc Ock tells Peter his name, and they do that same old tired joke where they make fun of an absurd sounding name. But when you go by Spider-Man, or your name is literally Strange, this kind of joke never lands.
Like a Garbaldegard? Hit a guy, hit it there.
Doctor Strange.
Oh, you're using your made-up names. I'm Spider-Man then.
Peter finds out that if the villains get sent to their own timelines, they will die, but Doctor Strange wants them to fulfill their fate and go anyway. Peter runs away from Doctor Strange with the device that would send them home, only to get stopped by Strange. Peter's body moves on its own, and I could accept him being able to do this if his life was in danger, because you could view this as his spidey sense taking over when his consciousness is gone. But how does this empty husk of a body know what he wants? I say that his husk knows what he wants, because why else would it keep the box away from Strange? This just felt really off for me. Once Peter and Strange fight, Peter steals his sling ring and gets out of the mirror dimension. He then takes the people who are very clearly evil back to Happy's condo around his Aunt May, which eventually ends up getting her killed. Peter seems to think that curing the villains will keep them from dying when they send them back, and I wonder, how will depowering someone like Max save him? He is flying at least 40 to 30 feet in the air in his timeline, and if he falls with no powers, he will not survive. If you take Norman Bright to the moment before he dies and you take his powers, unless he hasn't pressed the button to bring the glider yet, he will also die. Are the villains in the Raimi Trilogy and the villains in the Amazing Spider-Man movies going back to the same timeline that they came from, or if you save Connors and Norman, who either die or go to jail before all the other villains in their own timeline, will you create a new timeline and effectively kill all the other villains? Endgame taught me that going back and making changes creates a new timeline, so I would assume that the rest of this movie is pretty pointless by that standard. See how messy the rules of the movie end up looking as soon as you think about them? Time travel is very hard to do in a story without getting really confusing really fast. Aunt May spends a lot of time trying to convince Peter that they have to save these people, and she shouldn't be this naive. She does not know of a single villain that has been helped or reformed. I assume Happy and Peter have talked to her about the villains they've dealt with, and there haven't been too many who have suddenly become good if you're nice enough to them. I think that May and Peter's arcs should have been flipped, at least in the beginning. Let May have a mindset of you can't save everyone, some people have problems outside of your control, and let Peter be the one who wants to save them no matter what, until they kill May. In doing things this way, you have Peter lose part of his naive nature and really put the man in Spider-Man. This movie acts like curing the villains was the right solution, but if you think about it, that just doesn't make sense. I'm going to get into that once I talk about the ending, so let's just forget it for now. Peter takes the villains back to Happy's apartment, and after spending some time working on their cures, we get this really eerie scene of Peter's spidey sense going off and him trying to figure out what's wrong. I like the fact that Doc Ock becomes a genuinely good guy once he gets his chip fixed. He's the one villain who will definitely benefit from getting a cure, so the fact that he was the first one to get cured and that the cure really works is a nice touch. Doc Ock was never really a villain, just a slightly reckless scientist who was really committed. The conversation between Peter and Norman being taken over by the Green Goblin is handled so well. Willem Dafoe handled the split personality aspect of his character beautifully, and both here and in Spider-Man 2002, you truly feel like Goblin and Norman are two completely different characters. That sort of change in character makes the fear that Peter is feeling in this moment feel a lot more real and personal. The fight causing Norman's hoodie to deteriorate into a hoodie that looks like something he would wear in the comics is a great Easter egg. I like how May tries to save Peter by injecting Norman with the cure, but it seems like the only reason the cure didn't work was because they wanted to keep Norman as the final villain. They could have had May distract Norman in a different way and keep the cure as a thing that May didn't even get the chance to try. That would solidify the tragedy of May's death even more, and you would keep the thought of what if she had the chance to use the cure in your mind for the rest of the movie. After May dies, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield show up, and I'm going to call them Andrew and Tobey for the rest of this video just to make things easier. Andrew and Tobey's reveals are a nice break from the sadness, and since the rest of the movie is pretty heavy, a little break from that kind of thing is a relief. Tobey, Andrew, and Peter have a conversation talking about all the people they've lost, and this is a great way to give us more information about what Andrew and Tobey have been up to, while also giving some perspective to Peter. This is probably the best written scene in the movie, and all three of the Spider-Men put on great performances. Once they finish talking, the group goes down into the school to make cures for the villains, and we get more banter between Tobey and Andrew. I prefer having them give info on what happened after their movies over the writers taking too much time trying to re-establish them as characters. Instead, because most people have seen said movies and are familiar with both of them, we get to see Spider-Man in different stages of life. Tobey as the older, more confident, and established one passing down knowledge. Andrew as a lost and broken man well into his 20s. And Peter, who is pretty experienced, but he's still relatively new to the whole superhero thing. They all learn, grow, and benefit from being around each other. The final fight is a great example of that. Peter is used to teamwork, so he can coordinate the other two into a working attack plan. Tobey has matured and is great at emotionally supporting both Andrew and Peter. Andrew helps Tobey with his back pain, and he saves MJ, which is a great moment for his character. Saving someone who he views as their Gwen when he couldn't save his own is pretty big for him, and while the movie doesn't linger too long on the moment, it still gives us enough time to feel its impact. Once all the villains except for Norman get cured, Peter and Norman have a face-off, with Peter going all out. Some of the best Spider-Man moments are when he stops joking and takes the fight seriously. Peter tries to kill Norman and gets stopped by Tobey. I'm a little conflicted on this. Peter killing Norman would have been great for solidifying the fact that May's death changed him, but him getting stopped is also great for maintaining his innocence. He's still a kid, and killing Norman is something he'd never be able to take back. So even though I disagreed with the decision at first, I get why they did it. Peter sends everyone home, and I really do not get how losing their power will save their lives, but the movie frames this ending as a happy one, and it is if you don't think about it. If you do, you'll realize that Peter really didn't do enough to save their lives. They're still going back to the moment right before their death, now way less prepared to deal with it. I do like the fact that Peter has learned from his previous mistake and is now willing to give up all of his relationships to save the world. That willingness for self-sacrifice is vintage Spider-Man, and this movie was a great coming-of-age movie that you don't quite realize is a coming-of-age movie right up until the end. Peter choosing not to get involved with Ned and MJ again is a wonderful sign of growth. They had already been hurt enough by being associated with him, and Peter comes to the realization that they're better off without him. Some people have said that Peter will reunite with MJ in the next Spider-Man, and I really don't like that idea. Doing that means that Peter's arc would regress completely, and it would make the ending of this movie useless. Peter is alone now, and the safety of New York is his main priority. He makes a new suit that looks really similar to his original comic suit, leaves his apartment to go fight crime, and the movie ends.
Is all that gone too? No, it's not gone.
This movie is good, but the overall premise is flawed. Curing the villains really doesn't do anything, so the send-off that's meant to be heartfelt just feels empty. There's a bunch of great moments that add a lot to the viewing experience, so as long as you're willing to ignore the flaws, you'll probably enjoy it. Andrew and Tobey's appearances were handled so well that I do think a lot of the love for the movie is coming from a genuine place and not just from nostalgia. This is how you carry over characters that we haven't seen for a while, having them continue on a logical path from where we left off their arcs. Tom Holland does his best job out of all three of his solo movies here, and that's doubly impressive when he's next to such a talented cast. I'm pretty excited to see where they'll take his character in the next movie.